I just got it. Okay, where we go.
There we go. So, well, thank you all for joining us and taking some time out of your day. Paul, just thank you for giving up your time to come and chat to us. I know that you're a busy man, and you've pulled back on some of the podcasts. So I'm super stoked that you agreed to come and chat with us. And we've got about an hour, and I know that you will have no problem filling that. And really, one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out, not just because I'm a fangirl, because of course I am, and I follow your work and have done for some time. But one of the aspects of the work that we do as house healers is, we tap into potentially we look at extraterrestrial contact that might be causing the disturbances with a client. And so what we've been trying to do with the network is each of the areas of the checklist is to bring a guest speaker on to speak to that. And I think that this one is just super, super important because, as a house healer, and I've been doing it for some time, I don't often get an affirmative in that area. But I always think about the impact on somebody if I do. And the reason why I think it's really important for us to remember this as house healers is, and as Paul will attest to as we dig into a little bit around his experiences, how much you hold in your conscious memory, how much do you hold in your subconscious memory, and the impact of bringing something forward to a client that perhaps they might suspect, but not necessarily fully conscious about it, and just the impact of those experiences have. So I think it's just fantastic. We have somebody who's willing to share their experiences, and there are many, and just really the impact of all of that. So thank you, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome.
Paul is not just an experiencer, that does not define him, but he's a researcher. And I think the term that I've heard used the most is boots on the ground. So you're out there overnight, you walk in the cliffs in the areas that you live, but you also investigate all sorts of different phenomena. Just anything that is strange and odd, right down to cattle mutilations, so like in the sky. You're a filmmaker. Please, can we have Wolflands in Canada? It's not in Canada yet.
It isn't, is it? I think we've got it in UK, Europe, and America, haven't we? We'll have to. To be honest, we're pretty green with this when we're surprised how well it's done. And I know you're not here to talk to me about Wolflands, but no, it's yeah, we're quite pleased. I never thought a man who spent his life knocking nails in wood for a living would end up making a documentary, that one that people are enjoying as well, and writing books. I packed in work and all this information, all these thoughts, and we'll say theories because I've got no definite proof of anything. They've been sort of kicking around in my head since the things that I saw and experienced in childhood. But I packed in work at 48, and not because I've got loads of money, people. I packed in because I'd worked hard and I were in a position where we could kind of manage. I'd seen so many people on building sites that pack in, go till the 60, 65, and they're bent over, the knees are wore out and everything. So I thought, right, we're in a position now. I don't owe anybody a penny in the world. I can do this. And then I devote full time now to the research. And it's, I'd call it multi-phenomena research, to be honest, Dawn.
Yeah. I agree. So this is just going to be a conversation. Hopefully you've got some questions as well, which we will get to at the end. But oh, sorry, I'm still just letting people in. So this is a nice big popular one, which is fantastic. So I've read Night People. So for those of you that haven't found Paul's books, Truth Proof books, and Night People is written specifically about Paul's experiences. So I've read Night People. It is Night People, isn't it?
It is, yeah, Night People. And I wrote the first 3 Truth Proof books, then Night People. And then another truth proof book. But obviously, as a little boy, we're not going to keep a diary, are we, of events. So I can only assume that these things happened at about the age of, began about 4 years old. I spoke about it at the Awakening Expo only a few weeks ago. It was quite daunting standing in front of an audience, a live audience, if that makes sense. And yeah, I think the catalyst to it, if you want me to jump into this, my dad was quite an hard man to live with. If I'm going to be truthful, the kindest thing I can say is that he would guy who'd smack first, ask questions later. And I kind of suffered at his hands up until the age of about 14. Unlike we've got 4 girls and they can kind of bend me around the finger. Mum used to dish the discipline out, should we say, not me. But anyway, when I went to bed, We lived in a little village, in a village called Old Dennerby. And on this night, my dad came and woke me up. And he wanted to show me something. You'd got pasture, marshland, and in the distance, about a mile away, the town of Mexborough. And I realised people overseas, you'll have to Google these locations if you wanted to. There's a power station at the far right, and there's a huge sphere of light at the side of the power station. It's huge. And the cooling towers are about 200 foot high, and it looked to be just above the rooftops, and you could see all the street lights of the town. And we watched it slowly make its way along the rooftops. Now, bearing in mind, my dad was ex-RAF and he were in quite a long time. He didn't know what it was, and I can hear him now saying, oh, I think it might be a weather balloon, or I'm not sure what it is. And then he left me and went downstairs. And I don't think there's any mystery. I think he went into the garden to look at a better look. But unusually, when I went to bed, I didn't come down to try and tease another 20 minutes out of my parents. But I've no memory of anything happening after that. I watched this, but I think that was the catalyst. And in the first book, I wrote about what I called the intermind connection. Whereas if you focus on the phenomena, and not necessarily the UFO, just the phenomena, with it could be spiritual, it could be poltergeist. What I'm saying is there's a connection. The phenomena will look back at you. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened that night, but from that time, like we said, a little boy doesn't keep a diary. Things began. And they're all cameos of memories. I've not got a start, a middle, and an end. So I can remember seeing the UFO with my dad. Then I can remember some time afterwards, we've got cattle in the field at the back. It'll make sense in a moment, people. We've got cattle in the field at the back. And so I need to reference them. And I woke up in the night and the curtains were like a steel blue colour. And they were made of fiberglass of all things. I don't think you could buy them now. And I'm looking at big eyes in the curtains. And I'm a little boy, and all I can reference is I've seen these cattle when they come up to Bottomot Garden. Dad tips his lawnmower clippings over, and they've got these big black eyes. And I'm not frightened. I'm just looking at them, and it's almost chameleon-like. They're coming in and out of focus because I know there's more to the eyes than that. And the next thing, they stood around me in bed, in my bed, and the proper, what people would perceive as alien beings. And I'm reluctant. Alien is the word, but I'm reluctant to say from up there because I really don't know. Do you know, they could, somebody from another culture or another belief system might think we were looking at demons. And so I don't want to close the door on anything. Unlike a lot of researchers and a lot of people, and that I'll tell you what it is and it's black and white. I don't know what they were. So I've got that memory. And then there's lots of cameos of events similar to that throughout my childhood. I never shared any of it, and it were terrifying. You get some people who, I've been to conferences and I've met, if anybody's familiar with Mary Rodwell, I've met Mary quite a few times, and Mary's got a totally different take on what these beings are and their interaction with us. And to be honest, I believe that people do have euphoric experiences and some kind of absolutely marvelous experience with beings or intelligences similar to what I saw. I just didn't come away with that experience. And the fear that I first thing I did, I wet the bed after I'd seen them that night. You don't mind me saying this, people, dear. It may as well be as honest as we can be. And so the first thing that I received when I went downstairs off my dad was a smack. And I wouldn't tell him what had happened. And I wonder how many people, if that would have been just a one-off, or maybe another one of them in childhood. I wonder how many people would have gone further on in life and maybe thought, talking about things of an unexplained nature with a group of people in a bar having a meal, and it comes up, and I wonder how many people would have perhaps thought to themselves or thrown it in. Do you know, I had the most bizarre dream when I was a little boy or a little girl. It was so strange, it was almost real. That's how it felt. And I wonder how many people carry those kind of memories. But for me, it went on till about 13, 14 years old, and they were just, I won't say one after other, because there's no lineage, there's no timeline. It could have been months in between each event. But once it had happened, once you'd experienced it, once you'd been in that situation, nighttime, whenever it's same again, and it was almost like a switch. When I got up in the morning, I prayed Dad had gone to work, because I knew what were coming if I'd wet the bed, which that's what were happening regular. And if he had gone to work, then obviously I didn't get smacked. But when I went to school, I were a different person. It weren't like switched off from it until about 6 o'clock, when I knew it was soon to be time to go to bed. And I wouldn't want to leave bedroom on a night. That was the thing about not, even though what were happening in the bedroom, I was terrified to leave that bed. And if I could have crawled into the wall, I would have done. It was so frightening. And you'd get the covers and bunch them in a huge like ball around you, and I'd leave a little hole because I wanted to be ready for when they came. Don't know what I was going to do, nothing, but I thought I would just, I don't know, it's like an animal on edge all the time. Eventually you'd fall to sleep, you were never ready, and you'd wake up and you were immersed in this strange surreal scenario where only things that can absorb anything are your eyes. You literally can't move. There was a strange feeling that went with it as well, though. And although I'll never know what it represented, it felt like, as anybody listening to this, have you ever leant on your arm or a limb, and it's sort of, you woke up and you've gone, because you feel it's numb. It's really, you think, oh, good God, I'm going to get that weird feeling. And if you're really still, you can almost feel the life coming back into it. Well, every part of my body, and I don't mean every time, but this is what I've carried from it, every part of my body, from head to toe, felt like that. And it felt like the blood were leaving my body and going back in, and like flow and return, it was the strangest feeling. And the only thing that you can do is absorb whatever it is that's looking at you. Absolutely terrifying. And it stopped. My grandparents lived in Scotland. So a few times a year, we might go for a few weeks. Nothing, no bedwetting, no visitations, nothing. It just stopped. Then we moved. There's a lot more in between, Dawn. So if you want to ask anything, because I'm jumping forward here, I realise that.
I wanted to ask, what did they look like?
What did they look? I suppose they'd look like what people would a typical grey alien. But I'm ever so reluctant to say that these things are aliens. Or the only word I want to associate alien is alien to what we are as human beings. But they were some taller ones. I mean, they'd got some incredible abilities, if that's what you would call it. So after I'd seen the eyes in the curtains, and then they appeared around the bed, there was another time, and I don't even know if this fits into. I don't know if it fits into that situation, or whether I just dropped onto another strange paranormal experience, because we lived in this village about a mile away from Mexborough. And on this day, Mum wanted to do the shopping in the nearby town of Mexborough. 2 buses a day into this village, one road in, one road out, and she weren't waiting for a bus. And we were poor, actually. We didn't have a lot of money. So we walked down what's called Ferryboat Lane, over the crossings, over the River Don Bridge, over the canal, and we're onto Church Street. Church Street is where I spent the first 6 months of my life. That's where I was born, until my dad had left RAF, and we were waiting for an house to come available, a council house in Old Denby that they were building. So I had to spend the first 6 months there. So is there a connection there? So this story might make sense in a moment. I can even tell you its season. I can't tell you my age. I'm probably 5, 6 years old, but it was autumn, because I was kicking sycamore leaves everywhere as I'm running along Church Street. And there's a disused blacksmith shop. The opposite side of the road, there was a street called Quarry Street. I think it probably still is called Quarry Street, but the blacksmith shop's long gone. And the bottom house on the corner of Quarry Street, opposite the blacksmiths, was where I spent the first 6 months of my life. So as I'm running along here, this street, Mum's walking along to do the shopping. I'm sort of, I don't know whether I'm in front or behind. I honestly can't remember, but there were some big stones that jutted out from below the windows of the blacksmith's shop. I'm assuming they were to assist the farrier in whatever they were doing in years gone by, but it was derelict. Some boarding broken away at the bottom of the windows, and I look in, climb on the stones and look in, and I'm amazed. There's a kiln glowing inside the blacksmith shop. So okay, I can hear people thinking, well, you're clearly mistaken. So just bear with me a moment. About 2 or 3 foot away from the kiln, there's a green leather sofa, like the ones with the studs in, like a British racing green leather one. It's my grandparents' sofa in Conisbrough, because I've got some in Scotland, I've just said, and then my mum's parents lived in Conisbrough. It's exactly like it. I'm looking at this thing, and I'm looking at the kiln, looking at this sofa, and in between that, there's an old lady. Now, my dad, when he left the RAF, he was working as a motor mechanic for a garage in Mexborough. An elderly guy called Frank Harrison, and he had I think it was his sister, elderly sister, who'd got a memory impairment, Maisie Harrison. She didn't leave. She was in front of the shop, and she was just about trapped there. She could only walk with assistance. This old lady's Maisie Harrison. She stood there, again the kiln, again the sofa, and she slowly walks to the window, and Mum's shouting me to come. And we've got this interaction. We're looking at each other through this little bit of dirty glass and this broken board. Eventually, I jump off the stone, go into town with Mum. She does her shopping. We're on the way back, jump on the stones. It's derelict. There's nothing there. So that's just another, I don't even know if it fits into the scenario, but there's a situation afterwards where I'm in that same bedroom, in the back bedroom of this property. And I wake up in the early hours of the morning, and it must be summertime because it's daylight outside, the curtains are shut, and I look forward in bed. And I've never seen these beings that I wrote in Night People, called them the night people, and they're in daylight, and they're there at bottom of bed. 2 tall ones. I want to say 3 small ones. I'm not certain, but I know there were at least 2. Turn away, absolutely frightened to death. Little boy, how old am I? I'm 5, 6 years old. 2 minutes seemed like 2 hours, but eventually I look back, and this is where it becomes bizarre for me. Well, if that isn't bizarre enough, we had nothing in our house, no bookshelves full of informative information, TV. I'm not even sure if we had a colour TV back in 1965, 66, 67. I don't know. But when I turn back and look, I'm looking at a row of people from Mum and Dad's wedding album. Now, we definitely had wedding album, and I definitely looked at that. There were no church, there were no grass, just these people. And I've no memory of anything after that either. I'd love to say, and this happened and that happened, but I didn't. All you're going to get from me are cameos of events and everything. At the age of 14, they moved from that property. They bought another house in Conisbrough, and it kind of stopped. It just petered out. Nothing. Once we'd moved from that house, nothing happened at all. I mean, there's loads and loads more events, if that's the name for them, that took place during my childhood at that property, but I don't know how far you want to move on. So I'll just, anybody, any questions? I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm just giving you the experience that I've got. I'm not expecting people even to believe me, because I realize a lot of this is seeing and experiencing is kind of believing. And if you've not gone through it yourself, I don't necessarily expect anybody to believe it, but it's just my truth, and I'm just relaying it the best way I can.
Linda, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Paul, can I ask you, when these beings were around you, if it affected your body's vibration in any way?
As a little boy, I wouldn't know. Do you mean were I perceptive to them before they arrived?
Yeah,
Is that what you mean?
I've got a reason for asking, because I had an experience where I was covered in this white light and my body was vibrating. And so I felt my vibration changing. So that's why I'm asking you, did it affect your body?
Well, to be honest, as Linda, as a little boy, I have no memory of that. I've no and I think I would have probably remembered even if I didn't recognize it for what it was, for what you're describing. Later in life, 1990s, when I got married, we'd got as girls, and we moved to Bridlington. That's when they were leaving these holes in my arms and my back and everything. I would wake up and I'd be aware that they were there, and it did feel like there was some kind of electrical atmosphere to the room, and you knew, but I weren't in any paralyzed state at first. It were almost, I don't know, you'd see a light in your peripheral vision as you laid there, and you'd look and you'd see another light to your left, and then another one, and I don't mean strong lights, just wispy lights, but it was something that was trying to affect your mind because of what was going to happen. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like rabbit caught in headlights thing. But no, I don't think the way you're describing it, Linda, no. But there was definitely an energy that they brought with them into the room. But as a small boy, I've no memory of that. I hope that helps a bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Paul, take us back to the New Year's Day when you were walking home with your parents, because that was an experience that you all witnessed. It wasn't just
there's another witness as well.
Is there?
There is another witness. I've only found out recently. I mean, I might have touched on it in Night People, but it doesn't make it any more true, people. But yeah, this is 1970, and Mum and Dad were members of a club called the Dale and Brown Sports Club in Swinton, which would probably be about 3 to 3.5 miles away from where we lived in the village. And on this day, obviously, it's New Year's Eve, and they're off to the Dale and Brown Sports Club for a party to let the new year in, and children could go as well. It was a great club, great atmosphere. They threw a Christmas party for the children, New Year's Eve party where children could go, cricket teams, football teams, trips away to seaside. It was just a good all-round club, and it had been snowing. But we weren't going to, Dad weren't going to drink and drive, and certainly the weather conditions, he didn't want to drive. So we set off on foot, and we walked through the snow, and we walked to Swinton. We had a great night. And I don't know, ding, 12 o'clock comes, everybody sort of lets the new year in. And sometime after that, we made our way home. Once again, obviously on foot. We walk through Swinton, we walk along Church Street past the blacksmith. There's no thought of any of this. I weren't gathering these thoughts as a little boy. It was just nothing. It's only like become relevant in my mind years and years later. So we come to the bridges, the Canal Bridge, the River Don Bridge, and the railway, and then we're looking onto what's called Ferryboat Lane. It's almost like no man's land. You've got this mile between Mexborough and our home at Old Denby. So we do all that. Dad wouldn't let me walk across the crossings. We are holding Mum's hand, even though it's probably 1 in the morning, 1:30 in the morning, and there's no trains, but that's that. And as we walk across the crossing and look down Ferryboat Lane, and even to me it sounds bizarre, I saw the most extraordinary thing. It's a narrow lane, just wide enough for a car, and to the right you'd got what's called the YEB pond, the Yorkshire Electricity Board pond, horseshoe-shaped pond. And then you'd got the swampland, and then you'd got the pasture where the cattle were. But in the edge side, there's 2 rabbits and a guinea pig. Domestic animals. And I see them instantly. And I were always a full-on little boy. Things you can't do now, obviously. I used to catch grass snakes. I'd go bird nesting. Obviously, all them kind of things. Great crested newts. I'd take them to Northern Zoological Supplies in Doncaster. All things that would you'd never be able to do now. But as a little boy back then, I were full on, and I saw these 2 rabbits and a guinea pig. I wanted the guinea pig instantly, but they never moved. They looked real, and I'd got a rabbit in a cage at home, and I pulled away to go for them. And Mum pulled me back, and as she pulled me back, she went, "Oh my God, Bob, what are they? I'm frightened." And I don't say I couldn't work it out. I don't even know what I was thinking at that moment. I can hear her saying she was frightened. And my dad said, "I don't know what they are, just keep walking." And I'd make another attempt to kind of break away. And he shouts, "Keep a hold of him." And I knew when he started to get angry, he'd have lashed out at me, and she's saying all the time, she's frightened. And I'm just fixed on these animals, and we looked reluctantly dragged past them. And I also noticed that their voices had changed. I didn't notice at the time. You know, when you run the scenarios back through your mind, it were like they were talking to each other through a tunnel. Yeah, you know, like anybody ever been exploring and seen a big 4-foot deep round tunnel under road and walked through it? Because I've done silly things like that. And obviously, if you talk through it, your voice makes a different sound. That's the kind of thing it sounded like. But any road, I'm dragged past these animals. I'm not having one, obviously. And my mum's really getting frightened and uptight. And what are they? What are they? I'm frightened. And Bob, my dad would call Robert. Everybody call him Bob. So as I'm dragged past, I sort of made one more attempt to look round, and then my eyes caught what were frightening them. And there's two of what I've called the night people. They stood in the snow, back in the field. They'd seen them. They weren't interested in the rabbits and the guinea pig. No idea they were still there, or I believe they were. You know, I weren't looking at something else and imagining it weren't rabbits and a guinea pig, but they'd seen these things stuck in the field. And that was New Year's celebrations and happiness over for me. Went home, went to bed, frightened to death all night. And that would almost be the end of it, Dawn. But I don't know, a few days later, a week later, Mum and Dad are talking to a neighbour a few doors up, a Mrs. Simpson, that were her name. And she's telling us that her son saw the most unusual thing walking home on New Year's Eve. And the rabbits and the guinea pig got brought up. And then Mum and Dad told me, I don't know whether I went upstairs or went out to play, but I had to go out. So doesn't prove what I'm saying, the most bizarre story, not that you're ever going to hear, but it's a strange one. It doesn't prove that I'm correct. But Mrs. Simpson, unbelievably, is over 100 years old and she's still alive. She's still, as far as I know, in the same house. So there's a good chance her son's alive. So that's something that I'd like to chase up, if only for confirmation that, I don't know, what is it confirmation of? You know, he might even want to deny seeing what he's seen. And just to jump briefly to another scenario, in 2002, I was traveling home from a place called the Joseph Rowntree Trust. I was doing student accommodation with a guy called Shorty in a van. And it'll relate to what I'm saying now in a moment. And we come through a little village called Sledmere, in East Yorkshire. And as we're driving up the hill, above the trees, there's a huge tube. It looked like a breadstick. Huge tube of white light. And we got out of the van on a lovely summer's afternoon. And Shorty, who's 6'5", by the way, and I'm 5'5", so that's the reason. I'm Shorty. So, and I'm saying to him, you can see this, Chris, can't you? You can see it. Yeah, and he's going, is it one of them UFO? I said, I don't know what it is, and you could feel it. But so where am I going with this? It didn't fly away, it just disappeared. But the next day, he's full of it. He's talking about it at work and describing what he's seen. And then over a period of a few weeks, he kind of talked it out of existence, and he won't even talk about it now. So a long way to get round to this guy, Mrs. Simpson's son. He might, even if I found him, he might not want to talk about what he saw, but I think it's worth pursuing. So sorry to sort of divert there a little bit.
No, not at all, Paul. It's just an interesting, experience that, your parents witnessed as well, but never talked about.
Never talked about it, no.
Validating for your experiences, as a child. And certainly from reading the Night People, the interactions and the contact that you had with these beings, whatever they are, definitely got more physical. And you just alluded to the holes in your in your body. And I just wondered if you wanted to share, as much as you feel comfortable, any of those experiences.
Yeah, well, I think it was 1993. We had 5 girls. We've got 4 girls now. And in 1993, we moved from South Yorkshire to East Yorkshire. We bought this huge Victorian house in East Yorkshire, complete wreck. That's all we could afford, but you can see that in its day it was an absolutely amazing house. Great big mahogany staircase that sort of weaved round. And so we bought this house, and it kind of started. So we'd had this big gap from 14 where very little happened. And then I believe it kind of started straight away. There were no running hot water or anything in the property. So for the first 3 weeks, I would come up just myself and I'd bring our eldest daughter up, Sarah. And she'd be about 11 at the time. Got a plumber in for first week. And he's getting hot water. Sorry, weekend he came, getting hot water on. Went for some materials and it were apparent straight away that something was wrong, because when we come back, he stood at front door and he said, I don't want to be in here, or not on my own. He said, it's spooky. There's weird things happening in the house. And, you know, we'd bought this house, I need to say, lock, stock and barrel. All the contents were inside it, everything. You know, chamber pots under bed. That's how it was. Personal letters in drawers, pictures up on sideboards. So I better briefly tell you why. An elderly couple had brought their family up in this property. They'd moved away. At some point, the old gentleman died. This old lady married a childhood sweetheart from Sheffield. Some point after that, she passed away. So he inherited a house and everything in it had no emotional attachment to him. So there's a lesson to us all. We need to make a will because, you know, he got the house. So when it was sold, everything was in it. But upstairs bedrooms, we didn't realize at the time there were bags and bags of letters, and they were full of automatic writing, spirit letters, you know, and people had been holding seances and various things in the property, probably a lot more, because 3 months afterwards, and I know you want to get to the holes in my body, but I've got to paint a picture of this property. 2 or 3 months afterwards, when we'd all moved in and Sarah had this top bedroom and we're stripping wallpaper off, there's satanic symbolism behind the paper. Not just pentagrams, there's lettering and all sorts. Underneath the floorboards, when you looked at the wiring or pipework, in all the rooms upstairs, there's pages of the Bible. I wish we'd have kept them to see what verses they were. Do you know what I mean? But there's pages of the Bible. There's a amulet with the very little amulet, and it had the full Lord's Prayer on it in this room under the floorboards. We'd been in it as a family, moved into it when we'd got it sort of habitable. Only a couple of weeks, if at the most, and there's a knock on the door. I'd got myself a job at a big building firm straight away. Mary was sorting girls out at school, and we didn't know many people in Bridlington. There's a knock on door early evening, so I go to the door. My little girls are following me, or young girls as they were, and there's a reverend stood at the door, and he introduced himself as Reverend Tom Willis, and he said, I've been to the property in the past, he says, and I've been told new people have moved in, I'd like to bless the house. And so he's talking to me. He's really sort of an amenable type of chap, and I let him in. And anybody who wants to Google Tom Willis, he was the exorcist, a renowned exorcist. They made documentaries about him. I didn't know any of this at the time. There's loads and loads of pieces of information on the internet about Tom Willis, the exorcist, the minister of deliverance, he used to call himself. So, but he never said that. He just said he wanted to bless the house. So we went around the property. Gets to the top room where we'd found all these letters. I'll ignore my phone. It's not bothering anybody, is it? Oh, we found all these letters. And he said, I wouldn't let your children sleep in this room. Well, Sarah had followed us upstairs and it were her room. So I asked him to leave very politely. Big regret that I never, in later years, followed it up. I think he passed away in 2014, Tom Willis. And I really wish I'd have found out the true extent of what he knew about the property. So before Mary and the girls moved up, myself and Sarah in this top room of the house one night, and so I'm looking out. There's a mattress on the floor, a new mattress, clean bedding on it, a chair at the bottom of the bed, black and white TV on it, which were in the room, and I'm sort of in that position, looking out onto the landing and these beautiful mahogany handrails and spindles. I woke up in the night, and there's probably a 30-inch pillar that goes off on a right angle to another bedroom, and the doors were all painted in dark wood grain, like dark brown. And I can see this huge figure, taller than the door. It's massive, but no defined arms or legs. But there's a head, there's definitely shoulders, and I'm looking at this shadow, nothing defined. And I'm thinking, it's one of them. It's unusual for me, and I don't mean it in a macho way, but why didn't I put light on? Why didn't I challenge or at least solve the riddle of what I was looking at? And I just laid looking at it. Once again, I think that's to stop you focusing on something else that's going to happen. Do you see what I'm there and I'm debating it. I'm imagining it. Am I seeing it? Is it just some? I mean, it's a new house, or it's an old house, but it's a new to me. And suddenly, I'm not looking at that anymore, and I'm looking at the spindles and the handrails, and they're white. And I'm asking myself, I've not painted them. And all staircase had like just a lining paper on it that were olive green. It were painted olive green, and it's all white, and the spindles are white, and they're almost luminous. And it's a huge staircase. It's 5 meters, or it wasn't up before I converted this property to 3 flats, 4.5 meters that contain this big staircase. And something's coming, and I'm watching it, and it's not fear. It's not like these experiences in childhood. And I can see beings just rising. And I likened it to a nativity scene, but I don't want people to think I'm trying to take this into some kind of biblical realm. I'm trying to describe the luster, that they were blues and golds, and if anybody looks at a Bible and looks at a child's book of the nativity, it's all as lustrous, or usually the colors, and it was shimmering. It was really strange. So the next thing, the spindles are getting whiter and whiter, almost like fluorescent tubes, and there's an explosion of light. And it's morning. I wake up and I've no memory of this temporarily. I've no memory at all. Sun's coming through window. Wake up. I said to Sarah, I think it would have been a Sunday, because I said, we'll work, Sarah. I'd say it to her like that till 2 o'clock. Then we'll go home to your mum and your sisters. And next week we're probably going to be moving in. So this is before Reverend Tom Willis. And I kind of stretched out my arms. And as I did, and they're still there, I don't think you can see them on camera. You might be able to. I don't want to knock my camera off. I've got on. You can just see one there, but there's loads of them. My skin's very white, so it's only when I get sun on my skin that you see these things. So anyway, stretch out my arms. They're covered in little holes that you can look into. They're only about the size of match heads. And suddenly I remember the shadow. I remember seeing the spindles. Basically, people, what I've just told you is what I remember. No more. I'd love to remember more. And I think you touched on it at the beginning of the talk, or somebody did. And some people have said, would you like regression? But maybe it's good not to remember. Maybe you might not like what you're going to remember. There might be a good reason for it. I'm not certain. So anyway, that was that situation. And I'd still not shared hardly any of this with Mary, my wife, what happened in childhood. And I didn't connect that to childhood. I mean, I was 31 years old then, stopped when I was 14-ish. So we moved in, the Reverend Willis came, as I was said, the exorcist, and things slowly started to happen. And I don't know what time we've got, so I will. So if I'll go back anytime you want, but we'll jump to 1997, and I'm quite specific with dates, people, because I've just actually done this talk at the Awakening, so I can remember. So it's good that you're asking me this. And me and Mary had been out. Girls were old enough to babysit, and what have you. So, Sarah was. So we'd been out in town, had a bite to eat, a few beers, come home. And loads of things had been happening. We weren't sharing it with neighbours. We didn't share it with. It just stayed with us. And woke up. I'm in middle back bedroom with Mary, and she's in bed with me. And I woke up in night, and the scenario I'm telling you about, the wispy lights. Saw it in my peripheral. I knew something weren't right. I just knew. And I looked. It's to my right, and I looked. It's to my left, and I kept doing it. And then suddenly, I'm in that position. I'm like that little boy again. I can't move. And they're there. Never got my head round it, because Mary's at side of me, yet they're either side of me. And I can't ever work that one out, because I feel like I'm still in bed. And they'd never communicated with me until that night. And it weren't audible, and it weren't what people would call mind speak, but I believe I knew what they were saying to me, and they were telling me not to worry. Don't panic, don't worry. And suddenly I felt a pain in my back. It were like being stabbed with an hot poker. It were horrible, and it were turning. And they were telling me it were a bed spring turning in my back. I'd love to say something exotic, but that's what they were saying. And the pain were off the scale. It were absolutely so. I can't say I fainted, but I imagine I must have passed out or something. Wake up, morning. I think there was somebody knocking at the door. It was Peter Garner over at Road, but that's beside the point because I didn't answer the door. One of the girls will have answered it. And I'm normally up early, me. I get up at stupid o'clock, to be honest with you. You know, I still do. I'm up at 5 most mornings. I sat on edge of bed, and Mary must have turned round and looked at me, and she says, "Paul, I don't believe it." She says, "You've got 3 holes in your back." So I'd already been to doctors. They'd already been making notes. It was Whitley Strieber who advised me to get my medical records. So you'll know, Dawn, if you've read Night People, there's excerpts from medical records in there, and this picture. She got up, left room, put a dressing gown on, come back in, and she got one of them Instamatic cameras, and she took a picture. These weren't little holes; they were like bullet wounds. And basically, what I'm telling you guys now is what I remember. Not, I'd love to remember more, although I've just turned around and said perhaps I don't want to remember. But it is frustrating because you run these scenarios through your mind. I won't say every single night, but there's not many days when I don't think about these things and think, she was just wishing me home and head. I'm reluctant to do this, what people would call hypnotherapy or regression, because I don't want to add something to it that didn't happen. I'd want it to be from in here, and not a suggestion. And then, because let's jump to Simon Parkes temporarily. It makes sense in a moment. I met Simon Parkes 15 years ago at a party. A guy called from Yorkshire UFO Society did a little party, Joe Dormer, and he wouldn't leave me alone, Simon Parkes. And he went, "I know what you are." Literally, that's exactly what he said to me. I said, "What?" He says, "You're a super soldier." And I thought, what the bloody hell are you on about? Sorry for swearing. And then I thought, you know, but I think if you'd have been looking for an identity, wanting to latch onto something, that would have stuck with me that day. I can only deal with my own experiences. But told me what he thought I was. No idea if I was or I wasn't. My gut feeling is I've never been anything like that. Do you know what I mean? But because Simon had a bit of influence within the UFO community, and he's speaking at conferences, some people would have thought, Simon's told me I'm this, that's what I am. But I think we've got to deal with it and sort of just be as level as we can, because I realize talking to you guys, some of the stuff I've talked about here, it just sounds off the wall, absolutely off the wall. But jumping back to the holes, I had biopsy done on the wounds. I had immunology screening. I didn't know until we got the medical records, and it's all there. It says, you know, whereas the doctors at our surgery were writing letters to the dermatologists and various other people saying, we want you to look at this young man's punch hole lesions that keep appearing on his body every 3 to 6 months. Myself and my partners are quite perplexed. That's the wording on I think I've put that little bit in the in the book. And I had all the tests, immunology screening, what did I just say then? Come on, biopsy, and everything came back as negative. I think they found that I was allergic to grass pollen, but it just continued. I think 1998 it kind of started to peter out, and lots of things have happened, but nothing on the scale. I actually went to bed fearing for my life with them holes in my back and the pain that I felt when that happened. But all the girls experienced it, but nobody ever experienced any puncture wounds. Mary's woke up. I mean, she's very quiet, my wife, and you know, sometimes you could go months, and then all of a sudden she'd said, something happened, you know, the other week or a month ago. Well, when? In October. I said, it's November now, Mary. Why didn't you tell me? Yeah, she says, but it's been bothering me. And I said, is that why? You know what I mean? You've sort of not been going to bed before me and things like that. She said, yeah. She woke up in night. I'm in bed. She said, and when she woke up, all the bedroom level with the mattress is covered in mist. And bearing in mind we're in a dark room, so we shouldn't be able to see anything. You know, when we go to bed and turn the lights off, we can't see in that room. So why are we seeing these things? That's another thing. It's like there's some kind of ambient light. It's weird. She said, but there's little beings similar to what I've been describing moving about in the room. That happened on a few occasions, and on one occasion, once again, she woke up and she said, I weren't in the bed. You see, I always think that when these things were happening, when I got the holes in my back, I know I went to bed with Mary and I felt like I were in bed when it were happening, but I was laid on my back. So how was this procedure or whatever's happening on my back? And she's laid at the side of me, yet they're either side of me. Nothing makes any sense. And I hope it's if it's made sense to you guys, then thank you, but it's not made sense to me. It never has. So anybody got any questions, please fire away.
Mike?
Hey, that's really interesting. It sounds somewhat traumatic, to be honest with you. It doesn't sound like something I want to have happen, and I believe everything you're saying. But
well,
have you noticed through your life, have you been able to have any way of like kind of like slowing it down or mitigating it, or I mean, it's really fascinating. And another thing interesting, a lot of people that I haven't personally, but you read books about like psychedelic experiences, they run into the same type things. So I don't know how this stuff works either, but it's definitely real.
well, without
have you figured out a way to?
I'm
figured out a way like.
Go on, sorry.
But have you figured a way from? Like, is it look? Sometimes it seems like location, like the houses you're in and stuff. Maybe the energy is different, but have you found this correlation? Maybe like, because for me, certain things like there'd be like different energy and environments change what I'm experiencing now, and
yeah,
that's one thing. But then have you found how to manipulate your energy in a way that can kind of like prevent this stuff? Or I'm just curious because other people experience that, and it's you know, hope for them that they could.
I can see where you guys are at, and it's a good place. I could see you looking at me quite intensely as I'm saying this, and I wondered what were going off in your mind. Seriously, I did. So thank you. Obviously, I'm not here to, like I said before, Mike. I'm not here to convince anybody that look, this is my truth, and you've got to believe it because it's so difficult. It petered out at the age of about 14, like I said, and started again at the age of 31. 1993 to 98, and then there's been lots of other things happening afterwards. But I have noticed, you guys are more into the energy than me, but I have noticed that at times of emotional trauma, things seem to be more active. You know, and not necessarily just for myself. I think we can all relate to that. You know, and it's almost like you're putting yourself in another emotional state that's allowing you to access these. We'll call it another realm. Now that's probably simplifying it, but or allowing these other outside intelligences to enter our sphere of existence. I don't know, be it a bereavement, be it some kind of elation, be it teenage years and puberty, and we get the suggested poltergeist activity and the excited energy. I don't know whether I'm on the right path with what you're thinking there, Mike, apologies. But I think if I wanted to instigate something again, I think I could. I think if I wanted to concentrate enough, I think I don't mean you could just start it up, but I think you could evoke some kind of reaction from whatever it is. I don't think it's far away from us, Mike. I think it's very, very, very close. Whatever it is, I think it's very close, and I think it's a kind of mind. I've always been very patient, you know. And as a child, I were an only child, and I could spend hours watching things and observing things, and I'm not sure whether that's a trait that's enabled these things to come through. But I've always been that kind of person. I might not have got the direction of your question right, so apologies if I haven't. So
no, that's great. It sounds like that makes sense. If there's like a heightened emotional state, maybe that, like, I go with that. I don't know. I notice sometimes that for me that would.
Yeah. As regards psychedelics and drugs, apart from I love beer, but I've never done drugs. You know what I mean? I just simply haven't. But do you know something? I've heard so many stories about people using ayahuasca and things like that, and accessing this or tapping into this other world. And what it fascinates me that the people who use this drug, this psychedelic or other psychedelics, but particularly that one, all seem to be experiencing a similar thing. You know, some kind of interaction with what, want of a better word, alien type beings, and some kind of euphoric experience. So that fascinates me. I've not used it, and I'm not advocating using it, but I'm just saying it does fascinate me that it might, in some instances, it might not necessarily be the drug that's inducing these visions, these experiences, but it might be the drug that's allowing us to access that other realm.
That's what I was saying. It seems like you. That's like why I mentioned that. Like, so some people like. And I'm not trying to. I'm just kind of talking.
I might have missed that, Mike, because you're just breaking up there.
No, but that's why I mentioned that some people that either through meditating like for very, very many years had the same. So it seems like you have a connection, able to access those fields that other people have access through psychedelics. It's kind of, it's just fascinating because a lot of people say, oh, they're from other planets, and they're like, well, there's a whole nother facet to it. So I don't know. Anyhow, I won't talk anymore. It's really fascinating.
No, it's good and it's fascinating. And when you touched on the meditating, that's not what I meant, but that's in childhood I could sit for hours observing. Yeah, like I touched on the fact that I did things that you wouldn't be allowed to do now, like catching grass snakes and things like that. And I would sit and wait because I knew that if I sat in correct position, eventually these things would start to move and start to come out. I'm very patient, and it makes you wonder. I don't know. Is it almost like meditation? I don't know, Mike, but
taking you to another brainwave state, and you know that kind of thing. You know, brainwave state. And I'm gonna pass to Shannon in a moment. But one thing, as you were talking about psychedelics, our brain produces a substance. So when we at night, it produces a substance that actually is chemically almost the same as plant-based THC, which is the psychedelic.
And what is the substance, Dawn?
Oh, it has a very technical term. I'll
tryptophan, is it? Is it tryptophan?
I'm not entirely sure, but I'll find that out and I'll email you. There's a wonderful parapsychologist called Serena Roney Dougal who's done quite a bit of research around that. And so, is that natural substance that we produce? You know, do some people produce more of it? And are they given? You know, is that giving us access to these different dimensions? You know, potentially. Is this just bleed overs from different aspects of? I don't know. It's just fascinating, and none of us know the answer. But there's just really, really interesting.
Well, I'll keep this bit brief because I know you said Shannon wanted to ask something. The reason I said tryptophan years ago, as well, I'm 60 now, so in my 20s, I used to be. I still got a gym, but I used to be training all the time, so I'd be taking all sorts of supplements, and I don't mean drugs, so natural supplements. And you could buy free-form amino acids, which are proteins, and tryptophan was one of the free-form amino acids. And even the words suggesting what it part of its function is. And you've got L-ornithine as well, and the talk about these things enhancing dreams and other things. So not just for the actual physicality that these things could bring about. So when you said it were produced naturally in the body, and obviously that is, but you can actually ingest these free-form amino acids. I didn't know that's what you were talking about. Apologies for rambling. Sorry, go on.
Not rambling at all. It's just fascinating. Shannon, you've been patient there.
Thank you. I was wondering, there's a few small questions, but they probably all roll in together. When's the last time that you had communication? And did they ever share any knowledge about why they put those holes in or what they were doing? And for all of us dowsers, has anybody doused for what those holes were, or have you doused?
I've never doused for what the holes were, Shannon. And
okay.
My knowledge of dowsing is very, very limited. There's a burial mound. People Google Willie Howe in the UK. It's probably the most famous burial mound in the United Kingdom. Myself and Mary, my wife, we took the rods and we went round the burial mound. It's like an hot cross bun, and it works. But jumping to that, no, never, because I've no knowledge of the mechanics of dowsing. I've never done that. I know that we've used them in the bedroom, and they turn middle of the bedroom. These rods definitely turn in the middle of the bedroom, and the bedroom, because it's downstairs now and it's converted into flats. So there's a kitchen at the other side. So you walk across the kitchen, the same line, they turn. So there's a line just about running through the blooming bed, which is, I don't know what that signifies. But and what were your other questions, Shannon? Apologies.
Just the last time you had communication, and if they ever shared with you why they were doing that or why they put the holes in your back.
No, the first time I ever got any type of communication was in 1997 when the holes went in my back. That's the first time I'd got any kind of recollection of them. And they weren't audible, and it weren't what people call mind speak, but I knew they were telling me to be calm. And, it's a bed spring turning in your back. It weren't no bed spring. It were absolutely sheer pain and terror. But that was the last time that I saw them in any kind of physical form like that. There's been loads and loads of other experiences. And now I take, not as a paid thing, there's loads of people want to come out to the areas where I've been doing this research. And what's strange is you can take certain individuals out, and I don't necessarily know if they've got any special attributes, but these things, what I've called them, the ILFs, the intelligent light forms, these spheres of light present. And I don't mean every time. We could go for 6 months. People said to me, well, how come I don't see these things? Well, you've got to be stood in a remote location in the middle of blooming nowhere, near a forest or on the edge of the cliffs at 3 a.m, and I could do that for 6 months and see nothing. And somebody else might be rock angler. Well, next day might be out there, and he'll ring me up and say, I've just seen some weird lights, Paul, because I get lots of reports now. So where am I going? Yes, certain people I've taken out there, these lights do seem to present. I took a guy out called Lee Hayward. Lee went out to disprove what I were talking about, but in a good way. Skeptic, but not sarcastic and just like, oh, it's all a load of rubbish. And it were almost like it were a display to prove to Lee. We were driving down Cliff Lane, which takes you to these cliffs, which are sheer 300 to 400 foot rock face to the North Sea. And he said, come on then, Paul, describe the lights. This is no word of a lie. And I'm driving in my undercar, and I just went, like that, and there's a huge orange sphere in the sky, and it just said it. So he didn't say anything to me at that time. We unloaded the gear. I've spent far too much on cameras, so I've just rigged some cameras up on facing North Sea, put a cover over them because there's loads of moisture. And over the period of about 3 hours, these lights presented. I didn't even manage to get them on film. They literally punch into existence. They don't drop like flares. They're bright orange. They're not illuminating the sky around them. And as fast as you're putting your camera on, because I haven't got the money to just leave a camera rolling for 4 or 5 hours, they've gone. But yeah. So we're taking note, and I'm sorry if that's a bit long-winded, this, but I just turned around to speak to Lee, and there's a hill at the back of us, and the hill's about 200 yards away. And I've just turned around to speak to Lee, and there's a huge orange sphere in the field with us. Lee's exact words is the influence that the light was giving off was as big as a Volkswagen Beetle. And as I'm pulling this Sony NX80 camcorder around, putting it on to film it, it's just imploding and gone. And to me, I know I can never know, but it were almost as though it's a display for Lee. Do you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying that the spheres of light are anything to do with what happened in childhood. I've got no knowledge of that, but somebody else, I think it was Mike, one about location. Our location's sort of prominent, and I have written in one of the books, I think it was the second book, Truth 2, Beyond the Thinking Mind, location is key, because if we jump away from my own experiences, we've got repeat areas, that are concentrated areas where all manner of unexplained phenomena seem to present. Now, I've sort of I don't know, I've turned it over in my mind. Are we dealing with one phenomena that can present as many things, sort of a hive mind? Are we in an area where lots of phenomena, like some kind of thin area, I haven't got the terminology for it, that where different unexplained phenomena can come through and present? I suppose there's loads of scenarios and connotations as to what it could be, but certain areas do seem to location is key, as Mike said. Certain areas do seem to be prevalent for lots and lots of activity, and it's the repeat areas. And the hill that I talked about there, we've had lots of activity on and around that hill. We've got a YouTube channel, the Truth Proof YouTube channel, and we do a live stream, and I've talked about this many times and got lots of reports from rock anglers. These cliffs, 300 to 400 foot, and the anglers at the end of this month, because it's a seabird colony, will be able to go and fish, and they will get on the edge of these rocks and they will cast out, and they've been doing it for 50, 60, 70 years. So there's one angler, Mick Sigson, he's fishing up there, man and boy, he's been fishing 50 years, he says. And I asked him the story. I said, have you seen anything unusual up here, Mick? And I know I'm rambling here, people, so stop me if you need to. And he goes, I saw a spaceship land on that hill. I said, when? He went, 1998. He says, I know that because it were a club match. He says, and I turned round. He said, there were a load of us fishing, and it's not like coarse fishing where you're round a pond. On the cliff tops, you'll just see a headlight of a torch. Or if it's daytime, obviously you won't, because, but, depending on tides, and they'll be spaced out half a mile apart, 500 yards apart. He said, and I just turned round, he said, and I thought, what's a combined harvester doing up on that hill at this time of year? He says, and it was November. He says, then I realised I can see sky between the land and the object. He said, and it slowly came down. He says, the sparks everywhere, flames come around it. People right and left of me started to leave. He said, I packed up my gear, we're running. He says, and it landed on hill, a spaceship. But once again, that hill, 1998 it were, November. And I've got confirmation now from another 3 anglers, and I wrote about that one in Truth Proof 3. And so location is key. Do you know what I mean? We've so many reports that, and I wonder how many go undetected, because with the subject of unexplained phenomena, a lot of people take this to the grave. You've got people in complete denial who take it to the grave, and it's such a shame. I mean, I don't know if anybody familiar with people within the UFO circles. You might have heard of Philip Mantle. He's a British ufologist, but he's just done extensive work with Calvin Parker, the Pascagoula abduction UFO encounter. If you've not heard of it, have a look. Calvin passed away about 3 weeks ago, but they've brought Calvin's case to life. It's from 1973, quite a famous case in the day. Lots of police interviews and everything of Calvin. I mean, they were on Pascagoula River fishing when this light appeared, and then they claimed that they were taken by these beings. But what's interesting, due to the brilliant work of a lady called Dr. Irina Scott, if you want to hear this, people, and I'll give a shameless plug for our web live stream, go on to the Truth Proof live stream on YouTube, and I interviewed Philip Mantle and Irina Scott last week. We had 2 hours with them. Yeah, 2 hours with them, and they go through it. There's like a little bit of a tribute to Calvin. And but because of their work, Irina's near Pascagoula. Philip's obviously in UK, and he's got all these connections. More people have come forward. But there's a lady come forward who said she was stood on the other side of the river, and she saw the blue lights with her husband. At the time, her husband denied seeing them. She thought something happened. Her husband he's passed away now. He's given a deathbed confession. He claims that they were abducted, kept it all those years from 1973, denied anything happened to his wife. This is kind of the nature of what happens with this subject. I'm not saying that everybody's telling truth. At the end of the day, not everybody was going to believe me. It's just, it's such a delicate subject. It's brilliant that these congressional hearings have just taken place, and although there were no smoking gun, we didn't get no ultimate proof of the existence of extraterrestrial beings or beings from some kind of other sphere of existence. We've got people in authority, people in power sat listening to these men giving their testimony of what they've seen. And it's just opening the door a little bit more. I've probably not answered your question there, have I, Shannon?
Probably answered it and more.
Yes.
Nick has got his hand up, and then I think we're probably going to call it time, because we're just coming up to, I don't know, 6 minutes past the hour. Nick.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Nick.
Thanks for coming and talk to the groups. All very interesting. I want just quick question for you. Are you still in the property you were referring to earlier, with the bedroom upstairs, etc.?
Yes, I've
You're still in
converted. We bought it in '93, Nick, and obviously we know what year it is now. So when our girls left home, I converted it into 3 flats.
Right. I was just going to touch that. Shannon touched on it slightly, but you haven't never had the house doused. It sounds to me like it would be a really interesting case to get the house checked, doused, and see what energies are present and what energies are active. And obviously, you're definitely dealing with them, and you're definitely connecting to them. You're a conduit of sorts. And it'll be interesting through the group's point of view to douse the property. So I was going to ask you, a bit cheeky, if you would like to, put just a rough floor plan, put it out to the group maybe through Dawn, and we could take a look for you, because it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, obviously, there'd be no problem with Topper House, because the guy in there, Bob Brown,
Sure.
He's what the tenants that have been in the property, and I'll keep it brief because I realise your time's. I've no objection to that. Basically, that's what I'm saying, Nick. But the guy in the top of the property's had lots of experiences. I mean, his bedroom's that room that Reverend Tom Willis, the exorcist, said, "Do not let children sleep in that room." He's had God. And I never told any tenants. I mean, maybe I should have done, but I never told any. The middle flat, the middle room, where I had my experience with the holes in my back, there were a lady in there. Her husband passed away, lived in Spain. She moved to this property. She was in it for 7 years. Just one occasion, she came downstairs, knocked on our door. "Have you got a minute?" "Paul," she said, "is this property haunted?" I said, "Why? Why do you say that?" To Wendy. She had a little Yorkshire Terrier called Buster. They used to be yappy as old, but they're all soundproof. They're done nice. They're nice flats. So it didn't bother us as such. But anyway, she said, Buster's laid on bed in early hours of morning. I don't know what time it was, really, if I'm being truthful. She said, and I felt the bed go down. She said, and I moved my foot to check where dog was, because he barks like mad. And I went, "Who's there?" She said she had a full-blown conversation with a man who claimed that he was called Alexander St. Clair. My name's Sinclair. It's family tree. We know nobody called St. Clair, so I'm not trying to connect us, but that's what she told us. And so she'd had that strange experience, and she can't remember what happened after the conversation. The very first time that she came to look at the property, sat in our kitchen doing tenancy agreement, and I never told her. And I'll stop then, Dawn, because I don't know. I don't mean I'll stop because I want to stop. I don't want to hold you guys up. She sat. I'm at kitchen table here. She sat opposite across the table, and there's a good bit of room behind us to kitchen wall, and a daylight and a gold light. You know when you get a sparkler and you go like that, and in dark, and you can see it move almost oily, you know, and it went from one side of the kitchen behind her and out, and I never said a word. I told Mary afterwards, because Mary were in the kitchen with us, but I saw it, and I've not seen a light like that in property ever. But it was just weird that Wendy were there. She's going to do a tenancy agreement, and this bloody light just went behind her. And it's not one of them, did I see that out of my peripheral vision? It just literally went behind her, and I don't know what the significance of that was, but it just there you go. But yeah, just contact me, Nick, and
yeah,
you never know.
sounds all very interesting.
Yeah, all good.
Paul, I could listen to you talk and share your experiences for hours and hours and hours, because there's, multi-phenomena, I think, is absolutely the right description. There is so much that you've experienced, and so many other experiences from other people that you've gathered. It's just mind-blowing. And for those of you that do want to, kind of dig into that, I would highly recommend the Truth Proof books. And if you want to know more about Paul's experiences with the Night People. So the Night People book is absolutely key in all of that. And do tune into Paul's, live streams. They're all recorded. I tend not to be able to watch them as a live stream, but I will watch them, every time. Afterwards, Paul just brings amazing people to the fore, and it's just phenomenal. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Can I just say one thing? And it's just a shameless plug, but
Please.
we've got. It's took me 3 years. We've just done a documentary called Wolflands. I maybe touched on it before, but it's on Amazon Prime. I'm not suggesting you buy it, but just read reviews. This is from a bloke who used to knock nails in wood. I think we've done something right. And have a look. All first-hand accounts, not from me, from witnesses who've seen something highly unusual. Lots of different witnesses. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No. I think it's I'm eagerly waiting for those of us that are from Canada. It isn't available to us yet. So
Oh God, yeah. Hey, have I got a memory impairment? You touched on that at the beginning, didn't you? Apologies.
I can't wait to watch Wolflands. But thank you, just from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And
Just give us a
Thank
shout.
you.
If you, no, great people, and Terry, Joe, Shannon, Mike, Nick, and I had to lean forward, but all good. Thank you very much. Really appreciate listening. And if you need me to have a little natter again sometime, give us a shout.
Love it. Thank you so much. And before everybody,
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
a couple of little announcements from
Thank you. That was incredible.
Colleen's course. There's 2 more sign-ups if needed for that to run. So if people are interested, do lean into that. Thank you for David. I don't know if David's here, for posting on our Facebook group and getting a conversation going. And our October speaker is a chap called Gary, I think it's Vasey or Vasey. He's got a background in magic, and he's going to be sharing some of his current work with Earth Energies. So, is Paul jumped off? My goodness! I'll follow up on the email. So, more to come. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks, Dawn.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.